Now out on 4K Blu-ray is The Terminator, the film that kickstarted James Cameron's career as a director and made Arnold Schwarzenegger the ultimate villain of 80s cinema. The Terminator has taken its time to hit 4K Blu-ray. The movie would often arrive quite early in the life of the previous formats of DVD and Blu-ray, but with Cameron having to approve every transfer and with him apparently being the busiest man on the planet, it took some time for him to revisit his 1984 masterpiece. There was of course concerns that Cameron would again utilise the same techniques he used to butcher the transfers to Terminator 2, True Lies and Aliens. The Abyss and Titanic didn't quite get the extreme digital noise reduction abusing the others did, but fans of the Terminator were rightly on the fence if they should invest in this new 4K remaster, fearing the worst. Damn! Now the Terminator hasn't been constantly remastered over the years, but Cameron has tweaked the image a couple of times for the various formats. He did a fresh transfer of the film back in the glory days of Laserdisc in 1995 for the THX approved edition. That maintained the original mono mix and it was cleaned up, but though some fans prefer the audio on the 1991 version of the Terminator on Laserdisc. But the main improvement was the picture, taking on more of a slight teal look in places primarily for the nighttime scenes. The old transfer from the 80s and into the early 90s took on a warmer, brighter look, which was far from what Cameron had intended. So this new remaster from the time seemed pretty faithful to what he had presented in theatres in 1984. This Laserdisc transfer would make its way to a non-anamorphic DVD in 1997. Then MGM would invest in a new remaster in 2001 with an upgraded 5.1 surround sound mix, which composer Brad Fiedel told me was very expensive at the time. And his new mix would incorporate some new sound effects, replacing many of the old stock gun sounds with new modern ones, which upset the fans, as these new sound effects didn't quite have the punch of the original. Now this is not uncommon. Superman the movie would have its sound effects changed around this time, and many years later the 4K release of Batman would have its sound effects upgraded, and sadly the old 1989 sound mix would be taken away. With this new 5.1 upgrade for the Terminator, the dynamic range and separation of the music and sound effects across the channels gave you a more cinematic experience. With this new sound mix they would drop the original mono track, which started these fan edits, who have decided to remove the new track and replace it with the old theatrical audio. In 2006, the Terminator would hit Blu-ray for the first time, but was only made available in the USA, as far as I'm aware. This would be a transfer of the master used for the DVD, but now available in HD. This was encoded in MPEG-2, so not the highest quality of encoding. The image is an improvement over the DVD, but by this point it's now looking tired and washed out. This Blu-ray doesn't include a mono track, just a new 5.1 mix and available as a PCM track. This didn't review well at the time, receiving middling reviews for its picture quality, but if you prefer how the film looked before it was remastered a few years later, this will be the best version for you. In 2012, the film would receive a fresh remaster. They would go back to the original camera negative to do a new transfer at 4K by Reliance Media Works, and downscaled it to 2K for its Blu-ray release and digital presentations in theatres, as most cinemas by this point had ditched their 35mm projectors and replaced them with 2K projectors, the fools. The Blu-ray would come with some changes to the picture, which did upset a number of the fans with its use of teal instead of blue, and with the reds and browns being toned down, and it looked too clean, though the grain wasn't scrubbed out, but many were used to the Terminator looking a bit more rough and ready, and not so polished, but this new version reviewed very well at the time from the various home media websites. So for this new version of the Terminator, in theory Warner Bros or MGM have gone back to that 4K master. I don't know if this has been confirmed, or have they just taken that 2K master and Park Road with their AI tools have sharpened and upscaled the image. What you notice straight away is how sharp and detailed the picture is. From the various screen grabs you can see the 35mm copy, to Laserdisc, DVD, the Blu-ray from 2006, the 2012 remaster and the 4K. You can see how the colours have shifted over the years, but also how detailed it's become. The 4K does look pretty much the same as the previous Blu-ray, clearly it's the same source, but what you are getting is a sharper image, with some minor HDR grading applied, which seems to take effect on various lighting sources, such as the police car lights, the nightclub sequence as the Terminator targets Sarah Connor, and the flames near the end where the Terminator emerges in its endoskeleton form. There are many arguments online that the film looked more faithful to the original 35mm print back when it was on Laserdisc and DVD. The remaster from 2012 changed the film radically, so let's have a look and see if these points are true. The DVD from 2001 would have a more balanced look with its colours. The 35mm version would take on a more blue look that spreads over everything, so something that is grey in colour, like the metal fence in the club, would appear more blue. So there was clearly a conscious effort to make the colours more natural at the time. So jumping to Blu-ray and 4K, there's more of a push towards the teal and green. Teal is often used to help improve skin tones, so 2012 restores more of the dynamic colours, but shifts to a more teal than blue, and it appears some of the reds have been reduced. To be honest, both the DVD and Blu-ray don't really match the 35mm visual design for its lighting and grading. Many of the arguments about how the film should look stem from those who grew up watching on TV, VHS and even DVD, and those fans are used to a particular look. So if you are used to a softer, more rough version of the Terminator, then these new remasters will look a bit distracting. If you look at the 35mm scan, it has a very unique design that hasn't been replicated on all the formats. It takes on a blue look with its lighting throughout, but we have to remember these scans aren't entirely accurate to the master negative. These are like 4th generation copies, which do have contrast shifts and other issues. However, I don't think many people are familiar with how it looked back in the 80s on film. Most people over 35 years old will be used to the VHS and DVD, which doesn't look like the original 35mm copy. For the 2012 remaster, they have replaced the blue for teal, which does give it this cold, sterile look throughout, which was a bit off-putting at the time, but I've got so used to it now over the past decade, and it's the most common version available, and it's how James Cameron wants it to look, so we just have to accept it for how it is. I'm not entirely happy about that, but for those purists, those 35mm scans are floating around online, and you can watch that version.
I don't care what you're doing, come and get me. What the?
So viewing it now in 4K and with Dolby Vision applied, it did look pretty nice. Yeah, it does look a bit too sharp for its own good, but the original grain is visible, it doesn't seem artificial. When it cuts to the Terminator's POV, it's grainy as hell, which is great. The HDR is subtle and the colour is nicely balanced. It seems slightly more blue with its nighttime scenes than teal, that was more visible on the old Blu-ray master, but only by a little bit, most notably when Kyle Reese arrives in 1984. There have been complaints again, yes, more complaints, that CG has been added to the film. This only occurs for literally 1 second or so, as Cameron has fixed a continuity error with the blade where we see the Terminator remove its damaged eyeball. Originally the blade he used had no blade, it was just a handle, so they have CG added the blade in, which you can barely notice. I have no problem with this. If Cameron had included some extra CG and it was screamingly obvious, then I would complain, but it's a tiny fix. But he didn't fix other glaring issues, such as the cable clearly pulling the lorry before it explodes, the guy in the background pulling a lever to make the Terminator stand up in the flames, and the operators behind the Terminator as it opens the door to the factory. All he has done is fix a continuity gaffe. For this new release, Warner Bros., who are distributing titles from MGM's back catalogue, have restored the monomix as a 2.0 DTS track, so the fans should be happy to have this available. Warner Bros. Are generally pretty good in offering the original sound mixes for their back catalogues in more recent years, alongside a new jazzed up Atmos track. The monomix does sound good, it's not compressed, it comes across as quite punchy in areas, and of course the old stock gun sound effects are there. But switching to the new Atmos mix, you naturally get a huge upgrade. I was very impressed with its dynamic range and had to turn the volume down as it was pretty aggressive and loud from the get-go. Brad Fiddel's score sounds incredible, with that theme bouncing between the left and right speakers. The opening titles were a joy to listen to, and one of my favourite parts of Brad's iconic score is when the Terminator chases Kyle and Sarah near the end through the tunnel. The score fills the speakers and is balanced nicely with the sound effects. One of my favourite moments in the film which deserves that Atmos option is when the Terminator enters Tech Noir, and you have the song Burning in the Third Degree playing in the club, and you see Sarah duck narrowly avoiding the Terminator as it walks past. and she spots Reese, thinking he is the Terminator. It's an incredible moment, but also the sound just sucks you into the scene. One of the highlights is watching some classic 80s dancing. Me and my mates used to recreate that dancing back in the day in the clubs, and the women were clearly not impressed. Or maybe they were, I can't remember, I was a bit drunk. There are no new special features. They bring over 3 featurettes from the old DVD, though it's missing quite a bit of the special features from the first special edition DVD and even the previous regular Blu-ray. It's a shame Cameron didn't provide anything extra. They could have dug up the old featurette on the film from back in the day that did get released on VHS. So if you've been watching the Terminator on Blu-ray for all these years, or perhaps done your own edit with the old Laserdisc audio, then I do think it's worth upgrading to this 4K. Its digital noise reduction is nowhere near as bad as the recent releases from Cameron's back catalogue. It still thankfully looks like 35mm film for the most part, but now it just happens to have the best focus puller in the world on it. As highlighted earlier, it's a bit unnaturally sharp in areas. When watching True Lies and Aliens, you notice problems pretty quickly into them, with waxy faces and sharpness levels looking strange between the background and foreground, but with the Terminator I just found myself enjoying the experience. I'm not someone who pauses a picture and zooms into it to find problems. If something stands out clearly and deserves a closer inspection, then sure, but analysing it to that extreme is a bit too much. Thankfully this is not an expensive disc, though it doesn't include a regular Blu-ray, which seems to be a common issue now. And of course it retains the original mono audio, though I'm not sure if it's the best representation of the mono mix from the various releases over the years. That's for the hardcore fans to decide, but often the case you can't please the mono Terminator fans who can't fully commit to which version is the best. So if you love the Terminator like I do, then I would imagine you've already grabbed it, but if you are unsure, then I think you will be happy with the picture. It's hard to determine if it's truly 4K or a 2K upscale. The picture isn't radically different to the Blu-ray from 2012, which does point in the direction that it could be an upscale, but what you get is more detail, it has a higher bitrate, and the audio is very impressive. Some have labelled the transfer garbage, which is a major overreaction. If you want to stick to your regular Blu-ray, then it's totally fine with me, but I think this 4K will be a big benefit to your home cinema viewing experience, especially if you have a big TV.
He'll find her! That's what he does! That's all he does! You can't stop him!
The Terminator.
Hope you enjoyed the video. Don't forget to click the like button and hit the bell to be notified of my latest reviews. Big thanks to my patrons and YouTube members for supporting the channel. If you want to get involved and gain access to exclusive videos and take part in Q&As, follow the link below.